At the end of September, Hurricane Helene slammed into the US state of North Carolina. It caused blackouts across the state, but then something unusual started happening. Not everyone was without power. Some electric vehicle owners could keep their lights on because their car batteries started powering their homes. It was a pretty cool solution to a pretty specific problem, but this could be the start of something much bigger. It turns out there's a way to connect up thousands, if not millions, of cars like these into a single virtual power plant that can charge up when energy is cheap and give that power back when it's needed most. It's called vehicle-to-grid, and it's a pretty great solution to a lot of big problems, from keeping your lights on, to reducing your energy bill, to making sure that the entire electricity grid keeps working properly. Here's how it works, and why it might not be long before it's everywhere. Okay, to understand how this unassuming thing can do all that, we first need to talk about the grid. It's everyone's favourite giant global network of cables and power stations that lets us do pretty much everything in modern society. And the way it works is pretty simple. There's the stuff that goes in, from fossil fuel power plants and renewable energy, and the stuff that comes out, which is the electricity that lets you charge your EV and watch this video right now. It's the job of grid operators to balance that supply and demand perfectly. That way, you can always provide the exact same frequency of electricity through this giant network. If too much starts going in, that frequency could go up and fry our appliances. Too little, and it would go down, causing blackouts. Now take a look at how much electricity we typically use over the course of a day. This part right here, called peak demand, is what usually messes everything up. That happens mostly in the evenings, as we get back home from work and turn on all our appliances right at the same time that the day's solar energy is starting to fade out. And this is what happens when we all plug in our EVs. It's like every house with an EV doubles the amount of electricity it's taking from the grid. Multiply that by a few million cars, and then add in the other big electric appliances that we need to start using, like heat pumps. It's pretty clear that keeping everything perfectly balanced is going to keep getting harder and harder. Now, that problem is typically dealt with by turning on more fossil fuel power plants to meet demand, but that's bad for the planet, and it's usually incredibly inefficient. We made a video about how much energy gets wasted this way. The other big solution that doesn't use fossil fuels is to build batteries that can store renewable energy during the day and put that energy into the grid in the evening or whenever it's needed most. And guess where a lot of new batteries are going? Into electric vehicles. This is where vehicle-to-grid, or V2G, comes in. The idea is to let electricity flow from the EV battery via the charger into the grid and back again as needed.
The principle is really quite simple.
That's Robin Berg, an entrepreneur who just launched the first V2G-enabled car-sharing service in Europe, with 500 EVs that can send electricity back into the grid when they're not being used.
If there's a lot of renewables, then you charge your car. If there's not, then you discharge your car.
That works because during the day, the vehicles can charge up whenever electricity is cheap and demand is low, without putting extra stress on the grid. Then, in the evening, when peak demand arrives, grid operators can tap into those cars as extra capacity to send back into the grid. On days with a lot of sun and wind, this can actually even make you a bit of cash. In some countries, grid operators will pay you to charge your car, as they need somewhere for that extra energy to go to keep everything balanced. Then, you can sell it into the electricity market in the evening. Now, this all sounds cool for the EV parked in your driveway, but it becomes a really big deal when there's thousands, if not millions, of cars with this capability. All those batteries suddenly start to function like a virtual power plant. Let's say there isn't much renewable energy today, or people are using a lot of electricity. Instead of turning on a backup fossil fuel power plant, grid operators can send out a signal to this huge network of car batteries, which can send just enough electricity back into the grid to keep everything balanced, until the demand goes back down or renewables kick back in.
Just to give an idea, there are like 8 million cars, now growing to 9 million in the Netherlands. And with just like 2 million of them being bi-directional, you have enough batteries for the entire grid balancing demand. So you can shut down gas forever.
So why isn't this already everywhere? Well, there's the obvious thing: cost. V2G only works with a special bi-directional inverter, which would either need to be built into the car or the charger when they're made. Then it also needs software and hardware to communicate with grid operators. And for home charging, you'll need a smart electricity meter, which can track the amount of electricity going both ways. All of that needs to meet the extremely high standards expected of both cars and anything that connects to the grid. One trial had an upfront cost equivalent to €5,600 per participant. But that same trial found that the annual revenue from storing cheap electricity and selling back into the grid was anywhere between 400 and 800 euros. So if those initial costs get cheaper, it could be profitable much faster. Then there's the battery problem. Batteries degrade the more you charge and discharge them. Using them as a power pack for the grid would result in them charging and discharging a lot more frequently than they would from being used normally. And as an EV's battery degrades, the distance it can travel on a single charge, also known as its range, gets worse. So for car manufacturers who are already competing over the range of their cars, adding in V2G isn't very appealing. Advocates say that this isn't a problem with new types of batteries that are becoming the standard in new EVs. Lithium iron phosphate batteries are typically able to go from full to empty and back up to full again, known as a cycle, more than 3,000 times, which is more than double the amount of today's most common batteries. But once you get past the cost and battery problems, there's the question of whether it's even legal where you live. In most places right now, there isn't any way to actually sell energy back into the grid from your car. And that's because regulators are interested in the idea, but pretty nervous about how to actually make it work. Remember how important it is to keep everything balanced? Well, controlling power plants or wind farms is a little bit easier than thousands, if not millions, of cars and chargers distributed around the country, which all need to be able to communicate with each other and the grid perfectly.
Your car becomes a battery on wheels. It's a complete new function of the car. And with that also risk involved. So if something goes wrong, then everyone is looking at the car.
There are some promising things on the horizon. There's a proposed law in California to require bidirectional charging in all new EVs at some point in the future. And Germany's Vice-Chancellor told German media that the regulations needed to allow bidirectional charging would be in place by January 1st, 2025. But it's going to take a long time before the types of cars you can buy will make any difference. That's especially true because unless you live in your own standalone house with a personal charger, this technology doesn't really make any sense yet. Right now, most EV owners do tend to own their own home or live in the suburbs, which makes V2G a bit easier in the short term. But if you live in a high-density city in an apartment block, there are only so many public chargers for you to leave your car plugged into all night. So until we figure that out, there's another way to make a lot of vehicles in the city bidirectional very quickly. And that's by converting these, and these, and these. Big fleets of vehicles with big batteries that already sit around for most of the day and are organised and operated on regular schedules. That's what Veolia did in the UK earlier this year, converting 2 waste collection trucks into bidirectional vehicles with batteries 6 times larger than a typical car. This small-scale public trial approach is a way to convince manufacturers, regulators and consumers that this technology can work and is a good idea.
They want to first deploy it in a controlled environment, so it's not a technology you just add to a car and give it to the market. You really have to be in control also as a car maker.
But where it might have the biggest impact is where the most EVs are coming online, and that's China.
EVs are a big priority for the Chinese government.
That's Ilaria Matsoko, who spent over a decade researching China's industrial and climate policies.
So all the incentives are there, right? The economic incentive, the political incentive, they want to make this work.
The country has started its own V2G trials in a number of cities, setting up bidirectional chargers and converting bus fleets in order to test how easily the technology can integrate into the grid. But Matsoko says if China decides to make V2G a priority, all that test infrastructure could very quickly become the norm for EVs there.
Traditionally, China has been quite good at allowing sort of local level experimentation. That's worked very well in the EV industry. The Chinese system is very good at investing in infrastructure. So if there is something physical to be built, then I think it'll be a lot easier to see that happen.
Chinese automakers like BYD already have some models with bidirectional charging. And that's putting a lot of pressure on manufacturers in both Europe and the United States to keep up. Both regions are trying to slow down the rise of Chinese EV imports through tariffs, so making their cars V2G compatible could give them a competitive edge. So while it won't happen overnight, the days of seeing our cars as just cars might soon be coming to an end. Despite the high costs and regulation barriers, a lot of big players in the industry are seeing the potential for technology like V2G to change the way we think about how and when we use electricity. That could make a big difference for our wallets and the stability of all those cables keeping our lights on. Because if we do manage to electrify everything, then the grid is going to need all the help it can get. So let us know what you think in the comments below. Do you want your next car to be V2G compatible? And for more videos like this, subscribe to our channel.